Hi, it's Paula from Paula Quilting. Welcome or welcome back. So in the last few videos about quilting tips, we have covered how to make a scrappy binding, but obviously it doesn't have to be scrappy, it can be from the same fabric as well, how to attach it to the quilt, and how to finish a quilt by machine, so it's, you know, quick and easy if you don't like that part of the process. In today's video I'll show you how I finish my quilt by hand. Again, a lot of things in quilting is a preference, so you just need to test the water, see what works best for you. I will show you my method. Feel free to test this method, and if you need any more help, please be sure to comment below so I can follow up. I quite enjoy doing binding by hand when I have time for it, because it's quite relaxing exercise for me. You know, you either switch on the music, you switch on the audiobook, or watch something on TV, and you can do it there. I very often take the quilts I finish by hand when I'm going to drop my kids to activities, so they go for an hour, and in an hour I can do a lot of binding. So that's another tip for working moms, where you can squish in all of those extra jobs. Let's get started. Okay, so to finish by hand, it's well, no, not everybody like it, but it's not very difficult, and I will show you how I do that. As with everything, almost everything in quilting really, how you go about your stuff is a preference rather than a rule. So you just need to perhaps test few different methods to find which one works for you. Needle, just normal needle, needs to sharp, good sharp needle with not too big eye. I use normally thread I use for quilting, which is polyester, good quality polyester thread. Color, I just use cream on everything, to be fair, because those stitches are barely visible. But again, preference, you may like to match your thread with the binding, or you can match your thread with the quilt back. It depends, on how your stitches will look like. I would say practice on a bit of scrap to see, like, where do you see the stitches more? Do you see them more on the binding that match with binding? Do you see them more on the backing that match with backing? Now, like I said, I use normally just cream color. The length I want to make is about a little bit more than to my elbow. If you take too long thread, it starts twisting itself, so you don't want to have too much of the thread. Just normal knot, nothing complicated. This is, I already did a little bit of stitching here, so this was my last place where my stitch came out, where I finished the thread. So I want to go under there, and I want to come out with my needle few stitches behind the last one. So I'll kind of restitch that a little bit again. And I went into the quilt part above that stitch here where the binding was stitched at the front side. So it's all nicely there secured. And just with how would you normally do that is, you're going into the binding, you go on the fold, it's like 1/8 of the distance, but again it's preference how wide your stitches are going to be. Coming out from that fold, and where your thread has came out, you want to then go into the quilt under it and do the same distance. And where that thread came out from the quilt, now you want to go to the fold, and you're coming out. And I just overlap a little bit to cover the stitch from where the binding was sewn on the right side, just a little bit. Now, so that's the traditionally, you go one, you're coming out, under, you're coming out, on top, you're coming out, and so on. I like to do it 2-in-1. So where I want to be to start my 2-in-1 is to be at the quilt side. So now I will go into the binding fold, but then instead of pulling my thread, I will go kind of twist my needle down and go straight to the quilt, and then I just come out from the quilt. So basically I've got that binding and quilt stitch done at the same time. So again, I came out from the quilt here, and then I will go into the binding on the fold. Here is the seam, so it's a little bit bulkier, so you might like to just go with the one stitch. But then I will go down to the quilt, so I've got going through the binding and through the quilt, and I'm coming out. So basically I'm making those two moves in one, which kind of saves a lot of time if you think about how much time it takes to kind of lift your hand up. So it's much quicker process. Now how I sit here at the camera is a little bit awkward because the quilt is quite far away from me, so I can record with this without disturbing with my head. But if I was doing it in front of TV, watching something or listening to a book or some things like that, it's quite relaxing exercise. Okay, so as you can see, there's a barely any, every now and then you can see a little bit of that stitch. It comes out really nicely. I will take some close-up when I finish so you can see how it looks both on the straight lines and where I get to the corner, how I tackle the corner. I will show you close-up as well. Okay, so I've come here to the corner with my stitching, and what I want to do is like I did with the finishing by machine, I went in and I trimmed a little bit of corner here. Not that binding tape, that will make a hole in your binding, so you don't want that. Just the quilt, I've trimmed a little bit of that corner here, so there's a little bit less bulk to work with. So I will be carrying on attaching it up to that corner, literally to the end of that strip. So I'm not stopping with that next that corner here is with the seam. I'm just going to the end of the binding. That's where my quilt kind of finished here now. But I'm still going to go in that fold, and I want to come out with my needle where I want that metered corner to start from. So it's all inside. I will come out and I will now fold my binding, and if that corner kind of is not where I want it, so this is where my thread comes out and this is where I want that corner to link here, so I will just push that inside so it nicely matches. So first I will kind of catch it here so that corner is in place and doesn't move anymore, just inside, and then I'll go back to the same point the thread came out from that corner. So now it's all held here in that point, nothing is moving, but I want to work on my metered corner, so I will push that edge inside and I will stitch it again with the same stitch method. You can even put a pin here to hold it for you, so you won't see the thread at all, but you will have a nice corner which will not move and won't go anywhere, because if you don't stitch it, it actually can move. And again with those two kind of steps at the same time, so I went inside into this part of the binding, then into the binding on the fold and came out again, and now I will go again inside the binding at the bottom and come out on this, on the top part of it, and then I will go back just do one stitch here at a time now. It's a little bit awkward when I'm trying to record. Normally if I sit like at the sofa or a good comfortable chair listening to something, it's much easier. Okay, so I cannot see any threads, but that corner is very well secured. So now I just need to come back again in the corner, and I will carry on with my stitching on the other side. So I will just do that first one single, and then I would again do double, so top one and bottom one. Now my thread is very short one, so I will just do one more double stitch, top and bottom, and I want to finish off my thread. And I will kind of change the thread and start new one. So what I want to do, once I came out from the quilt side, I will just go, I will move that binding out of the way, and I will just go to that binding, that quilt part above the stitching line, and just secure the thread there a few times. Nobody will ever see it again. So here we go. Because once I start with the new thread, I will come out a little bit further behind that last stitch, and then I will carry on. I hope you found that short video useful, and perhaps you will add something to your own technique, or you've learned something new. That would be great. Thank you for watching, and see you next time.